Hello, everyone. My name is Izzy Kasdan, and I am the Executive Director of the New Jersey Cultural Trust. Today, we will be reviewing what the Cultural Trust is, its unique qualification process, and how to apply to become qualified. Before we get started, I want to encourage anyone watching to actively confirm whether your organization is already designated qualified. Qualification lasts for 3 years, and if your organization has experienced staff or board turnover, you may be unaware that your organization is qualified. Please use the web address on the screen to go to the Cultural Trust website and check the list of currently qualified organizations. You can use the Apple F or Control F function on your computer to search for your organization's name in the document or find it listed by county. The expiration date of your qualified status is also listed. Please feel free to pause this recording so you can check the list. I will start by providing a brief introduction to the New Jersey Cultural Trust. The Cultural Trust is part of a constellation of arts and cultural agencies housed at the state of New Jersey, many of which you may be familiar with, including the New Jersey Historic Trust, the New Jersey Historical Commission, and the New Jersey State Council on the Arts. The Cultural Trust is the youngest among these arts and culture agencies. It was established by legislation in 2000. The mission of the Cultural Trust is to ensure a stable and healthy cultural industry in New Jersey that is sustainable under fluctuating economic conditions. The Cultural Trust is a public-private partnership, which means it is funded both by public state dollars and by private contributions. The Cultural Trust is also a permanent investment fund, which means it functions essentially as an endowment for New Jersey's cultural community. The Historical Commission and the State Council on the Arts, by contrast, receive an annual appropriation and grant it all out each year as grants. The Cultural Trust, instead, does not rely on annual appropriations for grant making. The Cultural Trust is a large sum of money that is permanently invested, and the income off of those investments is used each year for grant making. The Cultural Trust's primary focus is grant making that addresses the issue of undercapitalization at cultural nonprofits. The Trust does this by focusing on 3 targeted areas that are crucial to ensuring fiscal and operational health, stability, and durability at cultural organizations. These funding priority areas are to build the endowments of nonprofit arts, history, and humanities organizations, to finance important capital projects, and to improve the organizational and financial management of cultural organizations. With these goals in mind, the Cultural Trust offers 3 different types of grants in an annual rotation: institutional and financial stabilization grants for arts organizations, institutional and financial stabilization grants for history and humanities organizations, and capital historic preservation grants for arts, history, and humanities organizations. There is never a match required for Cultural Trust grants. To get a sense of these grant programs, you can review past guidelines on the Cultural Trust's website. The establishing legislation links the Cultural Trust to 3 recommending agencies with which the Cultural Trust partners to offer its grant programs. The 3 recommending agencies are the New Jersey Historic Trust, the New Jersey Historical Commission, and the New Jersey State Council on the Arts. For each grant round, it is the recommending agency and not the Cultural Trust that sets the guidelines, creates the application, manages the review panel process, and determines who should receive a Cultural Trust grant. These recommendations for grant funding are then submitted to the Cultural Trust Board for ultimate approval. For the upcoming fiscal year 25 grant round, the New Jersey State Council on the Arts is the recommending agency, so only arts organizations are eligible to apply. But in order to be eligible to apply for any of the Cultural Trust annual grant programs, organizations must first be designated qualified by the Cultural Trust. That's the bulk of what we'll be discussing today. Why should you go through the process to become qualified? Because it's the only way to become eligible to benefit from the grant programs that the Cultural Trust offers in partnership with its recommending agencies. You can think of qualification as a sort of registration process with the Trust. Because the Trust's mission is to bolster the sustainability of cultural organizations as a whole, you must first demonstrate that you meet certain criteria as an organization overall. That's what qualification is. As I said, you have to make sure you have applied for qualification and that the Cultural Trust Board has determined that you meet the requirements for qualification before you can apply for any grant opportunities. Applying for qualification is totally separate from applying for a grant. Once you are qualified, you are then eligible to start a separate grant application. Since applying for qualification and applying for grant funding are two separate processes, you should be aware that the information you share in your qualification application does not carry over to any grant application. Qualification is not like a notice of intent to apply for a grant. It's not linked to any specific grant application. Once you become qualified, your status as a qualified organization lasts at least 3 years. If you receive a cultural trust grant in that time frame, your qualification status automatically renews. During the 3 years in which you are designated qualified, you can apply for any cultural trust grant opportunity that becomes available. Here we have an overview of the steps in the cultural trust qualification process. First and foremost, before you even start compiling an application, check the list of qualified organizations on the Cultural Trust website to double check that you are not already qualified. If you are already qualified, wait until your status expires to reapply. Once you have confirmed that you need to apply for qualification, you will access the qualification application online, print it out, complete it, compile the required attachments, and submit by mail. Once the Cultural Trust Office receives your application, we review it to make sure all of the required materials have been submitted and that it meets the eligibility requirements. If any materials are missing, we will contact you and give you the opportunity to send us the missing materials. It's very important that you provide contact information for a human being at your organization so that we have a way of reaching you for this purpose. Once Cultural Trust staff determine that your application is complete, your details will be submitted to the board for consideration at their next scheduled board meeting. At that meeting, the board will consider whether your organization sufficiently meets the requirements for qualification. They will vote on whether or not to designate your organization as qualified. After the board votes, there is a 10-day veto period in which the governor's office has the opportunity to veto any board action. After waiting that 10-day period, your qualification status becomes final and is valid for 3 years. In order to become qualified, an organization must meet the following criteria: be a separately incorporated nonprofit organization, be tax exempt under the Internal Revenue Code of 1986, be incorporated for at least 4 years prior to applying, be operating for at least 4 consecutive years prior to applying, have a functioning board that provides financial oversight to the standards set by the Cultural Trust, have a primary mission to promote the performing, visual, and creative arts in New Jersey, or to promote or preserve history and humanities in New Jersey, be New Jersey-based, be in good standing with New Jersey Charities Registration and Division of Revenue filing. I want to emphasize that organizations must be primarily arts, history, or humanities focused. Because the Cultural Trust focuses on supporting the institutional stability of the cultural sector, grantees must be cultural institutions, not cultural programs within other institutions. Organizations with broader missions, like libraries, universities, and community centers that run arts, history, or humanities programs alongside non-cultural programs are not eligible. Whatever institution is tied to the EIN number submitted, that's the institution whose mission we must evaluate for a primary cultural focus. The following types of entities are not eligible to become qualified by the Cultural Trust: individual artists or historians, for-profit entities, nonprofit entities whose primary mission is not to promote the performing, visual, and creative arts in New Jersey, or to promote or preserve history and humanities in New Jersey, private, state, county, or municipal colleges and universities, state, county, or local governmental units, authorities, or corporations created by such units, and qualifying governmental bodies as defined in New Jersey Title 52. Qualification is a separate application process. The qualification application form is available on the Cultural Trust website. The application is a paper form with required attachments. Unlike grant applications, qualification does not happen on Sage. Here's how to find the qualification application on the Cultural Trust website. Once on the Trust website, use the website menu to navigate to the Grant Opportunities page. At the top of the Grant Opportunities page is a box of information with the heading Qualified Organizations. In this box is always the most up-to-date list of organizations that are already qualified by the Cultural Trust. Also in this box is the hyperlink to the PDF with the qualification application. Click this link. This is what the application PDF will look like when it loads. The first 2 pages are simply instructions about what qualification is and the qualification requirements. The application itself begins on page 3. The application starts with a form that you will need to complete with your organization's main identifying details and contact information. The form is a fillable PDF, so you can either type your information directly into the form or print out the form and handwrite your information into it. The application form asks for 3 different identifying numbers for your organization: your FEIN number, your charity's registration number, and your Division of Revenue and Enterprise Services entity ID number. The distinction between these numbers can sometimes be confusing. I'm going to review each of these separately. Your Federal Employment Identification Number, or FEIN number, is the number assigned to you by the federal government. It is 9 digits long. It is included on your IRS letter of determination. And if you do not know your organization's FEIN number, your bank may have this information, as you would have had to use it to open an account. Or you can call the IRS Business and Specialty Tax Line at 1-800-829-4933. Or you can check your Form 990. Your EIN number is listed in Section D on the first page, which I have highlighted in this image. Your charity's registration number is a number assigned to you by the state government. It is 7 digits long, beginning with CH. You use it annually when filing your charity's registration with the New Jersey Division of Consumer Affairs. If you do not know your organization's charity's registration number, you can search for it on the charity's registration website. We provided a link to this public database in the application PDF. Or you can check your charity's registration filing, which would be the Form CRI 200, CRI 300R, or Form CRI 400 that you submit online every year. On the same Consumer Affairs website where you can search for your charity's registration number, you should also check your charity's registration file standing. Many organizations may not be aware if their file standing is non-compliant or retired. Sometimes it's as a result of a minor issue on a filing from several years ago. The Cultural Trust cannot qualify your organization if your file standing is non-compliant or retired. Search for your organization on this website and check your file standing. You should call charity's registration as soon as possible to rectify any non-compliant or retired standing. Cultural Trust staff can provide relevant contact information for you if needed. Your Division of Revenue and Enterprise Services number is another number assigned to you by the state government. It is assigned at the time of business registration and incorporation. While charity's registration is only for nonprofit entities, every type of business in New Jersey operating in New Jersey has been assigned a number by the Division of Revenue and Enterprise Services. It is 10 digits long, usually beginning with a 0. Organizations must be currently registered as a nonprofit corporation with the New Jersey Division of Revenue and compliant with all renewal requirements in order to be qualified. You use this number annually when filing your annual report with the New Jersey Division of Revenue and Enterprise Services. If you do not know your organization's DOORS entity ID number, you can search for it on the DOORS website. We provided a link to this database in the application PDF. Or to find your entity ID number, you can check your DOORS annual report filing or your business registration certificate. Once you have completed the form with your organization's information, it is time to assemble your required attachments. Your application for qualification is not complete unless you include all of the required attachments. First, we require a copy of the board-adopted mission statement clearly identifying your organization as one with a primary purpose of arts, history, or humanities. Unless they are readily available, we do not need the board minutes or the record of the board vote to prove that the mission statement has been board adopted. Next, we require proof of your organization's active good standing with the New Jersey Division of Revenue and Enterprise Services. We just discussed the New Jersey Division of Revenue and Enterprise Services in the context of your entity ID number. Every year, as a business entity, you are required to file an annual report with DOORS. This is different from the paperwork you file with charities registration. It is a brief online form in which you share information about your board members, as well as your workers' compensation insurance. This is the website where you complete that online filing. Once you complete the online form, you are emailed a link to a certificate of annual report filing. You must click the link in the email and download the certificate within 30 days. Here we are asking for you to send us your most recent certificate of annual report filing. It looks like this. This is an anonymized version, but it would be filled with your organization's information. Next, we require a copy of the organization's IRS tax determination letter as proof of your organization's tax-exempt 501c status from the Internal Revenue Service. Please make sure you submit your letter of determination, which contains the language that mentions your 501c status, like, we are pleased to inform you that upon review of your application for tax-exempt status, we have determined that you are exempt from federal income tax under Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code. Your organization may also have a letter from the IRS that simply confirms your EIN number, but does not discuss your tax-exempt status. That letter will not fulfill this requirement, so please make sure you send us the correct IRS letter. Next, we require a summary of your organization's activities for the past 2 years, describing major programs and services. This can be an internal document or a set of bullet points. It's just meant to give us a comprehensive sense of what your organization does as far as programming to flesh out the mission statement that you submit. You can send us published annual reports that your organization sends to donors, grant reports sent to annual grant funders, reports delivered to the Board of Trustees, or a bullet-pointed list of your programs and services. We don't necessarily need you to put something customized together for us, as long as you submit something that outlines all of your activities for the past 2 years. If you have any activities that are not arts, history, or humanities related, those activities must also be included in this summary. Please make sure you send us this information to cover a full 2 years of activities. Many organizations send us just 1 year of information and their applications are considered incomplete. We will also not accept a generalized list of program offerings. This information should be specific to what has actually been offered over the last 2 years. This next requirement should be public-facing external documents. To illustrate your summary of your programs, we'd like some documentation of what you offer. This could be event calendars, brochures, email blasts, outreach materials, press releases. It's just important that this is material that is intended for public distribution. Please don't go overboard with this requirement, especially keeping in mind that you will need to pay for postage. Please send us a maximum of 5 items, no books or large-scale publications, please. And last, there is a financial documentation requirement. We ask that you please review this requirement very carefully, as it is different from organization to organization. The financial documentation requirement is dependent on your annual budget size, as long as you do not have an endowment of over $100,000. Your budget is defined as your annual total gross income, not expenses. These are the 3 budget categories. Each one has a different documentation requirement. For organizations with annual total gross income of $500,000 or more, you must submit certified independent audits for your organization's past 2 completed fiscal years. Regardless of your budget size, if you have an endowment of over $100,000, then you also need to submit certified independent audits. For organizations with annual total gross income between $25,000 and $500,000 per year, you must submit your Forms 990 and your board-approved budgets for the last 2 completed fiscal years. You may instead submit 2 certified independent audits or independent financial reviews if you have those. For organizations with annual total gross income under $25,000, you must submit a copy of your board-approved annual budgets for the last 2 completed fiscal years. It is essential that you submit 2 years of documentation. That means 2 audits or 2 990s and 2 budgets. Organizations that only submit 1 year of documentation will have incomplete applications. Please make special note that organizations in this middle budget category need to submit 990s and budgets. The budget requirement is often overlooked. Organizations that only submit 990s without budgets will have incomplete applications. Your application form then needs to be signed and dated by 2 different individuals at your organization, an authorizing official, which is usually a staff member, and then a board member. Make sure titles, printed names, and dates are all included. We want to make sure that you don't leave out any of these required materials, so we have included a submission checklist to help you check to make sure you have included everything we need. Please make use of it. Again, we want to make sure you don't go overboard with documentation. Please only send us what we have specifically requested in the application form and checklist. This will save you on time and postage. The following types of documents are ones that organizations sometimes submit, but that we do not need, such as your Form ST5. Organizations sometimes submit their Form ST5 to fulfill the requirement of documentation demonstrating your tax-exempt status. This is a state-level form, so it does not confirm your federal tax exemption and does not fulfill our requirement. You do not need to send this. We only require your IRS letter of determination to fulfill this requirement. Also not necessary to submit your Form CRI 200, CRI 300R, or Form CRI 400. This is your state-level charities registration renewal form that you file every year along with your 990. We only need your 990 and not this form. Your certificate of incorporation or your articles of incorporation, the IRS letter confirming your EIN number but not confirming your 501c status, which I mentioned earlier. And you do not need to submit the parts of the application PDF that are just instructions. You only need to submit the form and checklist pages. Once you have compiled all of the required materials in hard copy, including the completed application form, put everything in a single envelope and mail it to the Cultural Trust. Again, please make use of the submission checklist to make sure your package includes everything we need. Please mail the package to our PO box. Don't worry about writing this address down. It's included in the application PDF document. At this time, the Cultural Trust only accepts applications submitted by snail mail. Faxes, emails, and other digital formats will not be accepted. Qualification is a rolling process. Organizations can apply at any time, and their applications will be considered at the next Cultural Trust Board meeting. The Cultural Trust Board meets 4 times per year. Typically, if you want to be considered at a particular board meeting, you must submit your application for qualification 1 month prior. For example, if you want the board to consider your application at its March meeting, you must submit your application by February. Cultural Trust grant programs do require applicants to become qualified before the grant deadline. We encourage organizations to stay up to date on their qualification so they do not have to scramble to become qualified before a grant opportunity. You will be notified by snail mail and email when your qualification status expires and will be encouraged to reapply at that time. Later in 2024, applications will open for the Cultural Trust Fiscal Year 25 Grant Program, which will be institutional and financial stabilization for arts organizations. If you are considering applying to this program, your organization must be qualified no later than the Trust's July 2024 board meeting to ensure your eligibility for the grant round. If your qualification is expired or will expire this year, your qualification application must be postmarked no later than June 24, 2024, in order to be received and processed in time for the Cultural Trust Board's July meeting. Due to the high volume of submissions, only applications that are complete and meet core eligibility criteria are presented to the Cultural Trust Board for consideration. If your application is incomplete, Cultural Trust staff will reach out to the contact person identified in the application to ask for any missing materials. An incomplete application must be completed within 6 months of the date the Cultural Trust first received it. After 6 months, the incomplete application will be deemed ineligible for consideration, and the organization must submit a new application. That concludes our workshop. Cultural Trust staff are always available to answer your questions about the qualification process or the Cultural Trust grant program. Our contact information is here. Thank you so much for your time.